Beyond being a funny satire, Spaceballs is so much more. Even the most devoted viewers are in the dark about its shocking mysteries and bizarre making of tales. What a fool you were to fall for the oldest con ever. Surprises abound in this science fiction parody from 1987, from shocking celebrity cameos and hidden filming sites to funny outtakes and controversial portions omitted from the finished product. Whether you enjoyed the film for its absurd humor or its brilliant plot twists, you are in for a world of hurt when you learn these 20 horrifying truths about Spaceballs. 20. Pizza Hut. Turned out to be a meltdown. Spaceballs Pizza the Hut, a gigantic pizza monster that oozed pizza sauce, seemed far less repulsive in real life. Gallons of fake sauce adhered to the costume's many parts, which were constructed from rubber and melted cheese. The inside actor Richard Carl could only endure it for short bursts before he felt like he was being cooked in a microwave. Hours were spent by the team cleaning the floor of sauce and gunk after every scene with the suit. It was nearly as disgusting as the beast itself. Every time Carl crawled out, he was plastered in slime and drenched in perspiration. Some people almost choked on the overpowering odor, which smelled like sun-baked spoiled pizza. Pizza the Hut, via his combination of humorous satire and outright repulsive spectacle, became an iconic figure despite the mayhem and agony. Crew members recall the sticky 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 mayhem and agony. Crew members recall It took enormous endurance, a strong stomach, and patience to bring that monster to life. I mean, have you ever thought about what makes Dark Helmet's lines sound so endearing? We should investigate the actor who wrote the lines in more depth. Lines of Dark Helmet, number 19. The brilliant actor Rick Moranis, who played the villain Dark Helmet with a wicked sense of humor, performed more than read their lines. Almost all of his lines were improvised by him while filming. That voice that admirers adore for its squeak and whine, he made it from scratch. People still quote those witty remarks and one-liners that were made up on the spot. Wearing Dark Helmet's huge costume, according to Moranis, was like letting out all of his pent-up frustrations. He put all of his untamed energy into the part, which required him to mix outrageous humor with a touch of danger. Moranis was urged to continue improvising by the director, who was enamored with his performance. His antics made it difficult for the crew to maintain a serious demeanor while filming. The camera operators would occasionally laugh so hard that the cameras would shake, almost destroying takes. After starting out as a simple mock villain, Moranis' bold imagination and sharp wit elevated Dark Helmet to iconic status. He nailed it, not only played the part. Cementing Dark Helmet's place as one of the all-time greats of the comedic film genre, the physical preparations proved inadequate throughout production, which is another stunning aspect regarding Spaceballs. Allow me to go into further depth with the specifics. 18. In the middle of filming, the budget was cut. A spectacular extravaganza resembling Star Wars, complete with enormous space battles and fantastic effects, was the initial intention of Spaceballs. The budget crashed midway through filming, ruining the spectacle of gigantic ships and huge laser battles that were meant to astonish audiences. Mel Brooks, the director, opted to completely embrace the absurd rather than give up or make something boring. They would make the most ridiculous, inexpensive galaxy they could find. and be proud of it if they couldn't buy a professionally polished one. The spaceships and sets appear like they were made in someone's basement. And that's why the whole thing is so ridiculous it could pass for a comedy sketch. The flimsy strategy paid off handsomely. When Brooks said it was the most inexpensive galaxy ever shot on film, he meant it. However, the parody's blatantly low-budget appearance also added to its comedic value. Spaceballs became a one-of-a-kind comedic classic by fully embracing its ridiculousness and not taking itself seriously. It demonstrated that elaborate production values and large budgets are not prerequisites for making a memorable and hilarious film. Mel Brooks consulted with others before filming began, which is an intriguing detail. With whom did he confer? Let's investigate. The 17th, George Lucas's ascent. George Lucas, the man behind Star Wars, had to give Mel Brooks the go light before production on Spaceballs could begin. In order to inform Lucas of his intention to create a parody of the renowned space tale, Brooks personally dialed his number. To Lucas's surprise, he only consented to one stringent condition: no Spaceballs products could be made by Brooks. Rather than taking this loss personally, Brooks managed to find comedic gold in the constraint. The film was brimming with extravagant props that weren't real. For example, Spaceballs, the flamethrower, the breakfast cereal, and the t-shirt. None of these made-up things were mere pranks. As a result, they became fan favorites and topics of conversation even now. Surprisingly, some of the most iconic knockoffs of movie memorabilia were inspired by Lucas' prohibition on authentic stuff. There would undoubtedly be a stampede of collectors if Disney, the current owner of Star Wars, decided to manufacture these trinkets. Picture this: Spaceballs. The flamethrower has enthusiasts waiting in line for hours to get one. Decades after its initial release, this ingenious twist demonstrates how a single creative constraint sparked a tidal wave of comedic and iconic pop cultural moments. Can you fathom how Winnebago achieved flight? Had any kind of impact? Could you believe it? Now we can get down to brass tacks. The Winnebago, number 16, existed in reality. A lot of people assume that Spaceballs' iconic flying Winnebago was an effect or model. It was a genuine operational recreational vehicle though. Real roadways were traversed by the group while they affixed enormous wings to a regular Winnebago. No CGI or tiny version of it is shown rolling down the road in the film. This is the real deal moving car. After the fact, during editing, backgrounds were added to create the space scenes. Studio sets were used to capture the interior views of Lone Star and Barf piloting the ship. Mel Brooks, the film's director, took great pride in boasting that his creation was the most inexpensive spacecraft ever filmed. Even more so, he was being serious. They saved a ton of money on special effects by transforming a regular camper into a comical spacecraft, using only their imagination and some metal wings. This ingenious low-budget method contributed to Spaceballs' remarkable quality. The flying Winnebago proved that Hollywood magic doesn't necessarily need a lot of money. It was both ridiculous and surprisingly plausible. It only takes a daring attempt and a desire to show it off to the world by racing down the highway. Barf, the bipedal beast. What struck you about him? Were his clothes flattering? Let's investigate. Number 15. Costume designer John Candy was a sight to behold in his portrayal of Spaceballs' half-dog, half-man sidekick, Barf. It was quite a challenge to wear the Boff costume. Its layers of dense fur served as an effective thermal oven. To further enhance Boff's realism, the costume had motorized ears and a tail that could be operated. Candy would rapidly perspire under the intense studio lights and would have to be spritzed with cold water in between scenes to prevent heat exhaustion. He kept his spirits up and never once grumbled about how painful it was. One of Candy's favorite roles of all time was portraying Barf, which he adored. He brought his own brand of warmth and humor to the role, which made Barf endearing and hilarious. My dearest friend, I'm a mug, half man, half dog. There was an improvised statement by Candy that became one of the most memorable parts of the film. The amount of effort he put in. Barf became an everlasting fan favorite due to his ingenuity, good-natured soul, and enthusiasm. John Candy demonstrated that genuine emotion is the source of hilarious and magical filmmaking, even as he melted within that fuzzy outfit. The scene of the jammed radar then appears seemingly in real life. What led the crew to that conclusion? Now we can get down to brass tacks. 14 was the jammed radar scene was all made up. Black Helmet discovers the radar entirely jammed, but not by enemy signals. This is one of the funniest scenes in Spaceballs. In its place, a crimson raspberry jam oozes out of every crevice. In his enraged state, he yells out the now iconic phrase, "There's only one man who would dare give me the raspberry." This well-known statement was actually cut from the original script. The fact that the actor thought of it on the fly really added to the comedic value of the situation. The gag was pulled off with the help of actual jam. Then spread it thinly throughout the radar apparatus. It was more than a prop. Due to its thick and sticky consistency, the goo actually jammed the vents and buttons. Production had to halt while crews cleaned up the equipment because of the extent of the mess. The combination of this impromptu stroke of comedic genius with the absurd use of genuine jam elevated an otherwise unremarkable joke to the level of a memorable sequence from the film. The carefree spirit is showcased to perfection. In the true anything goes style of Spaceballs, a jar of jam may defeat the most formidable villains. Have you seen a character that features not one but two actors? Maybe it was one of these characters? Let's investigate. Two performers were featured in Matrix. In Spaceballs, two brilliant ladies collaborated to bring to life the iconic character Matrix, a golden robot. Immerse Joan, that's sharp, funny voice, which gave her so much personality, was delivered by the famous comedian. Actress and expert mime Lorene Yarnil performed the entire show while dressed as the robot. It is worth noting that Joan and Lorene did not cross paths during filming. While Lorene was performing live, Joan was recording her lines in a studio. But when they collaborated, cinematic magic was born. Dot Matrix evolved into an amusing and ingenious spin on C-3PO from Star Wars. She was far from being an overly stuffy droid. Rather, she was brash, self-assured, and never short of a quick retort. Many viewers were captivated by her dazzling good looks, hilarious lines, and fearless demeanor. Joan and Lorene gave Dot personality, making her more than a machine. She had the sensation of being a vibrant, authentic persona. Working together, they demonstrated that everything is possible, even with a robot, via innovation and cooperation. One of the most memorable and adored robots in cinema, Dot Matrix is still talked about today. There was a scenario involving studio execs that was completely comedic, which is an oddity. Could you tell me which scene it is? How did the concept come to be? Now we can go into the specifics. Track 12, Combing the Desert Studio. Company brass were always nagging Mel Brooks to include more visual gags in his films. They were going for dramatic, attention-grabbing jokes. Brooks came up with what could be the most overt side gag to satisfy their expectations in the history of film. The desert was being combed. Picture this. These solemn-looking soldiers, as if they were scouring the biggest sandbox on the planet for lice, trudging across the seemingly endless dunes while pulling giant combs behind them. Incredibly, it left an indelible impression on me. It wasn't all plain sailing though. While filming this bizarre sequence, one of the enormous combs snapped in half during a test run. The team swiftly taped it back together instead of scrapping it, allowing them to continue rolling. No, the moment was unspoiled by the breakage. Actually, it made the scene more picturesque. Audiences couldn't help but burst out laughing once they caught sight of it. Because it was so out of the ordinary and ridiculous, the sight of soldiers meticulously searching the desert became ingrained in people's thoughts. This astute joke has risen to the ranks of the film's most cited and lauded scenes throughout the years. One reason Brooks's humor has endured is his ability to transform a single phrase, combing the desert, into a gigantic live cartoon. That even the most basic direct concept has the potential to become the most memorable joke ever is demonstrated by this. Did you know that when it hit theaters, the picture was not a huge hit? When did Remarkable get its start? Now we can get down to brass tacks. Number 11, a humble start. Spaceballs didn't exactly light the globe on fire when it debuted in theaters in 1987. The film was not a huge hit, but it did well enough to earn almost $38 million, 0 cents in the US, out of a total budget of $22,700,000, 0 cents. No one could decide how to rate it. Opinions on the film were mixed. Some thought it was funny and included good parodies of Star Wars and other popular science fiction films, while others thought it was juvenile and stupid. Following its VHS release and several cable TV airings, Spaceballs garnered a loyal fan following. Home viewing allowed those who couldn't make it to the theater to enjoy the film's wacky humor and memorable quips. Its infectious positivity and carefree vibe made it an instant hit and eventually a cult classic. This quirky comedy became something considerably larger than anybody had anticipated as the years passed. From a middling box office success to a cherished cult classic, it has captured the hearts of both science fiction and comedy enthusiasts. Spaceballs is now lauded for being a light-hearted parody that never gets too serious, demonstrating that a film doesn't have need to become a smashing success to make an impression. You might also be interested in another stunning fact. There is a character that combines two heroes from Star Wars. I don't recognize this person. Let's investigate. 1000. Lone Star. It was a stroke of genius to combine Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, two of Star Wars' most iconic figures, to create the character of Lone Star. His appearance and demeanor reveal this hybrid. Lone Star, for instance, sports a vest reminiscent of Han Solo's stylish smuggler garb, while simultaneously embodying Luke Skywalker's innocent optimism and purity of heart. The innocent rural kid who longs for excitement. Because of his eclectic blend of characteristics, Lone Star is both recognizable and funny to fans who can easily spot the elements he takes from each character. But Star Wars creator George Lucas had a serious worry. He aimed to ensure that Lone Star didn't look too much like Han Solo, should someone mistake it for a carbon duplicate. Mel Brooks, creator of Spaceballs, chose to change Lone Star's look in order to sidestep this issue. Brooks took inspiration from another well-known Harrison Ford role, Indiana Jones, rather than just clothing him in Han Solo's attire. That's why Lone Star comes across as more of a daring adventurer when she wears a leather jacket. This astute wardrobe decision elevated the satire to a whole new level. Not only did it make fun of Star Wars, but it also gave the audience something else to laugh about: Indiana Jones. The end product is a one-of-a-kind protagonist who not only stands out, but also seems like a nod to Harrison Ford's legendary heroes. The producer of the film really plays a few characters in his own film, which is an interesting and shocking revelation. Now let's get down to brass tacks. Mel Brooks roles. Number 9. Mel Brooks wasn't happy to just aim Spaceballs from behind the camera. He jumped headfirst into the action, playing not one but 2 comical characters, President Grub and Yogurt, the clumsy but witty parody lover. It was quite a challenge to transform into Yogurt. The particular makeup was heavy, thick, and uncomfortable for Brooks to wear for more than a few hours at a time. Picture yourself with multiple layers of latex and paint adhered to your face, obstructing your airflow and making it difficult to move around. No matter how stifling the cramped conditions were, Brooks never considered casting anybody else in the role. For what reason would he subject himself to such pain? For the simple reason that he was certain no one else could do justice to the absurd allure of yogurt. He was really concerned that every single joke, quip, and ridiculous moment would be perfect. When it came to Brooks, comedy was no laughing matter. The smallest jokes were important to him, and he thought the only way to be sure they would land was to deliver them personally. This obsession with detail helps explain why Spaceballs is still a fan favorite. From directing massive spaceship scenes to enduring layers of makeup for the sake of a chuckle, Brooks put his heart and everything into every aspect. His unwavering dedication demonstrated that remarkable outcomes may be achieved when an artist is prepared to endure immense pain for the sake of their craft. You would never have guessed that the composers were in a haste to complete the score. Let's delve into the specifics. The theme song comes in at number 8. The iconic theme music of Spaceballs, which fans love and can't get enough of, was almost never ever considered. Actually, when filming was underway, it wasn't even considered. Director Mel Brooks didn't notice anything was amiss until after the film had ended. To match the film's zany tone, he envisioned a carefree, funny score. To that end, he consulted his reliable composer, John Morris, and presented him with an unconventional task: create an unforgettable theme tune in the span of a few days. Even though Morris was short on time, he enthusiastically adopted the plan. They put together a fake rock band out of studio players instead of a genuine one. The music was recorded by this made-up band, while Brooks and Morris rewrote the lyrics numerous times, attempting to fit in last-minute quips that complemented the film's outlandish humor. The song was improvised in a flash, but its carefree, entertaining attitude ended up being one of Spaceballs' best features. It was almost an afterthought, but it worked wonderfully with the film's humor and parody. One of the main reasons Spaceballs is still loved by fans today is its spontaneous and freewheeling nature. There was also that strange incident where several of the cast were seen viewing Spaceballs while the film was being made. How was it? Let's investigate. The 7th, observing cosmic rays in Spaceballs. Do you remember that iconic scene from Spaceballs where the protagonists sit down to watch the film within the film? Viewers are still taken aback by the scenario because of how peculiar and self-aware it is. Spaceballs production company was understandably concerned at the moment. The executive thought the concept of a film seeing itself would completely perplex the audience. They were adamant that the scene should not have been in the final cut because it was too unclear. The great mind behind Spaceballs, Mel Brooks, however, maintained his position. He sensed that this joke involving a movie within a movie was unique. Brooks was adamant about keeping it since he realized how hilariously it broke the conventions of storytelling, breaking the fourth wall and subtly reminding viewers it was fiction. That scene became legendary, often referred to be meta. It allowed viewers to identify with the joke. It eventually prompted a slew of filmmakers to use comparable styles. The film is now taught as a masterclass in creative narrative in film schools, demonstrating that what was previously considered strange has become an important moment in the history of humor and cinema. The Star Wars films do not begin with Spaceball. A lot of people are unaware of this. Now we can go into the specifics. Hardware is number 6. Civil Wars. Hardware Wars, a little risky endeavor, poked fun at Star Wars long before Spaceballs exploded into theaters. An innovative amateur filmmaker named Ernie Forselius pondered in 1977, could the galactic epic be parodied using ordinary household items? For the meager sum of $8,000, 0 cents, Forselius transformed a former laundry into a recording studio. Transform his low-budget spoof proved that imagination could triumph over costly special effects, despite the ridiculous homemade props. Audiences were enthralled. Surprisingly, Hardware Wars raked in over $500,000, 0 cents, despite its low budget and amateurish appearance. Audiences were captivated by its endearing silliness. Lucas himself, the man responsible for Star Wars, was so impressed that he praised it as a charming little film. Little did Forselius know that his low-budget parody would set off a long-chain reaction of science fiction spoofs. You don't need $1 million to make people laugh with his creative viewpoint. A little imagination and a toaster on a string can do the trick sometime. One of the actors had to deal with her most difficult sequences while filming, which is shocking. Could you tell me who she is? What transpired? Now let's get down to brass tacks. 5. Daphne Zuniga and the yogurt scene. The stunning Daphne Zuniga, who played the iconic Princess Vespa in Spaceballs, had to go through one of the most awkward moments of her acting career. She had to dive headfirst into a massive pot of yogurt. At that unforgettable time, it was bad enough when the yogurt was only cold and had a faint sour aroma. The yogurt got thicker, stickier, and significantly stinkier as they shot the sequence again and again, take after take. When filming was over for the day, the location had transformed into a slimy, repulsive slop that smelled like neglected, rotting food in the back of the fridge. Goop adhered to Daphne's hair, face, and outfit whenever she surfaced for air. Throughout the horrific experience, she remained true to herself, never lost her composure. Intent on providing the director with the precise elements he required to successfully execute the sequence. Because of the unpleasant memory of the filthy tub on set, Daphne shied away from yogurt for a long time after the incident. Her perseverance was rewarded, even though she felt disgusted. She proved that great performances frequently necessitate unsavory sacrifices, with her legendary depiction as Princess Vespa. Something else to know about this film is the long-awaited sequel that fans have been eagerly anticipating for years. Who cares about it? Let's investigate. Number 4, the successor. Spaceballs ends on a funny note by hinting at a potential sequel, Spaceballs 2, which would focus on the search for additional funds. This ironic title captured the film's carefree attitude and fondness for mocking Hollywood's fixation on sequels admirably. My name is Mel Brooks. Spaceballs creator and star Rick Moranis has repeatedly stated that he would only consider directing a sequel if the actor reprised his role as the villain Dark Helmet. But Moranis decided he needed more time to focus on being a parent, so he quit acting completely. The much anticipated sequel was never made to happen because of his sincere decision. However, the hope of seeing additional Spaceballs has never really faded. Some have speculated for a long time that the show could get a new Netflix version, animated TV series, or even a revival. From time to time, news articles will surface that give the impression that something fresh could be in the works, which excites the devoted followers. People continue to beg Brooks with all their heart to bring back the galaxy of Spaceballs. The requests for a comeback have persisted through many channels, including social media campaigns, fan letters, and nostalgic interviews. This space parody's continued popularity demonstrates that certain comedy are just too unique to pass away peacefully. The sequence involving the deployment of imposters is another element that represents a spectacular moment. I want to go into the scene's intricacies. Thirdly, there are 2 of the stunts. You can anticipate a dramatic scene when the courageous heroes are apprehended and led before the gods. These aren't their gods though. They squint and yell instead. Their stunt doubles look like this. At that very moment, a comical scene is cut to. Assuming the roles of the actual characters, 4 blatant imposters stand awkwardly. Their wigs are so cheap looking that they look like they came from a costume store, not to mention those enormous, cartoonish and blatantly false mustaches. The most unexpected way the illusion is broken makes this moment comedic gold. Everyone in the crowd starts laughing uncontrollably, amazed at the ridiculousness of the stunt doubles. The film's obvious self-parody of action flicks that go to great lengths to conceal their stunt actors is immediately apparent. Afterwards, a stuntwoman who had conflicting emotions about the scene confessed that she had played a double. While she was flattered that her on-screen moment elicited such a strong response, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of embarrassment at the fact that instead of applauding her athletic feats, people were laughing so hard at her. Nonetheless, she grasped the concept that it was all a smart gag in the film. In addition to parodying action cliches, the scenario gave the dedicated stunt crew their due, although in the most absurd way imaginable. Did you realize, though, that one of the actors reprised a role from a previous film? Then who was that? Now we can get down to brass tacks. The second was that in Spaceballs, John Hurt reprised his iconic and comic alien death scene. What occurs when the renowned actor John Hurt appears in a self-portrait? The reference to the infamous science fiction horror film Creature, in which William Hurt's character meets the horrific end of having a hideous creature rip its way out of his chest, is instantly recognizable to fans. Mel Brooks, the filmmaker of Spaceballs, turns this horrific scene into a comedic masterpiece. The monster that bursts from Hurt's chest isn't an alien parasite, it's a really funny diner joke that makes everyone laugh so hard they can't stop. It wasn't simple to get Hurt to agree to parody his own famous scene. Nevertheless, Brooks shared a unique bond with him. He had previously produced the Oscar-nominated and profoundly moving film The Elephant Man, which featured John Hurt's extraordinary skill. Because of their friendship, Brooks was able to convince Hurt to reprise the part in the most ridiculous and surprising way. This ingenious turn of events not only parodies a famous picture, but it also reveals how eager Hurt was to mock himself, which adds to the moment's memorability and charm for viewers of both films. Spaceballs, last but not least, is still Mel Brooks's most popular album. Why is this the case? We'll examine the specifics up close. Firstly, the film that Mel Brooks was most often asked to make. Mel Brooks claims that even after all these years,